All right, hey there, I'm Brandon. Welcome to Interviews with Mostly Unknown People. Today, interviewing remotely in beautiful Post Falls, Idaho, with my friend Tim Greeley. Hi, Tim.
How are you, Brandon?
Good. Hey, so how long have we known each other?
Oh boy, I think we may have met the very first time at men's conference, and you were on a Buell, and I think that was the first time we met. Now, you have a better memory of it than I do.
So the early 2000s anyway.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, cool. And now you did something with the men's conference. For those that don't know, of course, this is Interviews with Mostly Unknown People.
That's right.
But you helped out quite a bit with men's conference in the motorcycle ride, and you, I don't know if it would be right to say you ran or headed up Honor Bound.
So, in 1999, Honor Bound with the Assemblies of God was going strong. That was the brand that Assemblies of God had for their men's ministry. And I wanted to take men's ministry past the Saturday morning pancake breakfast.
Okay.
I wanted to get them involved in doing something for the kingdom, to invite their unchurched friends to come to church, and what better way to do that by going on a ride with your buddies on a motorcycle. And so I presented that to the Northwest Ministry Network back in 1999 with Jimmy Burnett. He loved the idea.
Okay.
In fact, he would love to see a ride at men's conference. And so between myself and Jimmy Burnett, the ride at men's conference was birthed.
Okay. Okay. So now, Honor Bound being nationwide.
Yes, sir.
Did the motor end of it get started here in the Northwest? Did you?
Well, we started the National Honor Bound Motorcycle Ministry. Started at the same time Honor Bound Motor Ministry started here at the Northwest.
Okay.
And so, and the Honor Bound Motorcycle Ministry for the National was really designed for their motorcycle chaplains here nationwide.
Okay.
Because that's what their focus was. Here in the Northwest, we're more interested in the motor ministry aspect, hot rod cars,
Right.
quads. So if it had a motor, it had a ministry. Was our catchphrase.
I like it. No wonder I liked it. So, all right. Well, for those that don't know you, let's kind of go back a ways. Now, you spent quite a few years as a police officer.
31 years with Seattle. I'm originally from upstate New York.
Really?
And as soon as I was old enough to get out, I joined the Air Force and got out and never went back.
Now, it's funny that you say upstate, because it seems my experience with people from that part. I spent a year and a half in New Jersey in the Army, and there are New Yorkers and there are upstate New Yorkers.
That's exactly right. I want to make sure that when they know the difference.
It's kind of like Washington and Washington D.C.
Exactly.
There's somewhat of a difference.
Big difference.
Okay, so you grew up in upstate New York. Did you grow up in a Christian home?
Yes, and I say that hesitantly.
I noticed.
Because the focus wasn't being Christ followers. The focus was going to church for my mom. Okay. My dad and my mom actually met in church. They sang in the choir together. But my dad had a falling out with the church, like a lot of people do, unfortunately, and he never went back. So I never ever saw my dad in church worshiping the Lord.
So the fallout was while you were a child, or before you were born, or
sometime before I was born, or as a child, because I have no recollection of him ever participating in church. It was
not
only
Christmas, not Easter.
No. And then my relationship with the Lord was strictly through my mom's relationship with the Lord, and that continued on in my teenage years. I would go to youth group, but it wasn't to worship the Lord or grow in the Lord. It was to see all the pretty girls that were a youth group. So
okay.
that was my motivation at the time. And it wasn't until I was actually in the Air Force, stationed in North Dakota, bored out of my mind.
How could you be bored in North Dakota?
Well, that is an interesting story, because I don't know what person was in their right mind in the Air Force to decide to give a 19-year-old an M16 and a Dodge Power Wagon and say, go. So you can imagine.
Now, were you military police? What was your
I
MOS?
I was a security specialist.
Okay.
And my job in North Dakota was guarding the missile sites.
Okay.
So we had alarm systems around each missile site, and we were stationed at a launch control facility where we were dispatched to the alarms. More often than not, it was a groundhog or something else that made easy target for a 19-year-old living on 16.
Oh man!
But and that was there out of sheer boredom, with way pre-internet stuff. This was in the mid-70s, and the only thing I found that was current was a Gideon's Bible. So I started reading this Gideon's Bible out of sheer boredom, and I started reading things that I'd never been taught in church or Sunday school, going to church with my mom, about Christ's return.
Really?
And I thought, I don't know anything about Jesus coming back and being ready, and some people staying and some people going. And fortunately at the time, we had a cook that was a Christian, and so I would ask him questions. And he later gave me a little pamphlet called The Four Spiritual Laws, and I read it and I accepted Christ.
Really?
Through that little pamphlet.
So I mean, so your initial journey, your first putting the toes in the water, growing up, going with your mom.
Yep.
But just bored. Thank God for boredom, huh?
Amen.
And Gideon Bibles.
That's right.
And good thing you had a Gideon Bible and not some other crazy book out there.
Exactly right. God had this orchestrated ever since. We talked a little bit about motorcycles. I started motorcycling when I was 15. I would earn money at jobs, collect my money, and I bought my very first motorcycle.
What was it?
It was a 1963 305 Honda Super Hawk.
I bet you wish you still had that.
Yeah, and they're available, but they're for a lot more money than what I paid for it. We had a 3-acre field behind my house, and so that's where I learned how to shift, because I never learned how to clutch until I rode a motorcycle. That's where I learned how to.
There weren't very many automatics when you were a kid. How did you get over?
So I hadn't even gotten my permit for my car yet, so I was still on the motorcycle, and that's where I learned how to shift gears and operate the clutch and the front brake and the back brake, because if you tipped over in a field, who cares? But what was interesting about that experience is that I would do that right after school. So about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'd fire up the Super Hawk and I'd head out to the backfield, and I would just do laps on this thing. And it's a street bike, but fortunately it was a mowed down field that was pretty easy.
Did you put knobbies on it?
I did not. But
you might not have fallen over so much.
That's exactly right. But the girls from school would walk by where I'm riding, and they'd stop, and they'd watch me ride my motorcycle in this field. And as I rode by, they'd kind of wave, and I'd stop, and they said, "Do you give rides, Tim?" And I realized at that moment, I just found the most exciting sport I could ever find.
So how many rides did you give?
Anyone that asked.
Anyone that asks. Anyone that asks.
That's right.
You could put a sign up, instead of kissing booth, right?
That's right.
At least made your gas money back.
Exactly.
Oh man! So how long did that last?
I eventually got my permit when I was 16. In New York, what's interesting about the permitting process with a motorcycle is you have to identify a mentor that lives within a quarter mile of your house. So as long as you identify name and address and phone number of a mentor, you can ride within a quarter mile of your mentor's house. And my mentor happened to be a New York State policeman who lived across the street.
Now, was he aware that he was your mentor?
He was fully aware.
Okay.
But what's interesting about that is that, being 16 and my girlfriend being on the other side of town, I would stretch that quarter mile to a half mile to a mile to 2 miles. And I would spend time at my girlfriend's house on the other side of town. But I remember one Saturday afternoon, coming back to the house, in the driveway was my mentor. His name was Dick Wire, Mr. Wire. And he looked at me and he said, "I'll take your keys." And he took my keys. And he said, "I'll give them back to you when I think you're ready to be responsible for this motorcycle."
Oh man.
So, in all essence, probably Mr. Wire across the street was more of a father influence than my own.
Okay.
Because my dad didn't care.
Yeah.
But
do you think Mr. Wire maybe saved you from some trouble by taking those keys?
I absolutely think so.
Yeah.
I absolutely think that it's a memory that I will never forget. You know, being disciplined in order to keep me safe and be responsible for my actions.
Sure. So have you been able to kind of pass that along, be somebody else's mentor or maybe tormentor?
I enjoy the tormenting type.
Right.
I was a Royal Ranger commander for numerous years, and I really enjoyed that opportunity to mentor young boys through that process. But that's really only been my experience. I have no children, and so being a part of a children's ministry has always kind of filled that gap for us.
Sure.
But it was short-lived while we're attending a church in Maple Valley.
Okay, cool. So you grew up there in upstate New York. What town in upstate New York?
Utica.
Okay, I've seen it on the map.
Okay.
I may have actually driven. Is it on the way to like
It's right on
Niagara
I-90.
Falls?
It's right on I-90. It's between Albany and Syracuse.
Well, I know those names. I've been to the big waterfall, Niagara
Yep.
Falls. I had a hard time getting back. We went on to the Canadian side because we were told that's got the better view.
It does.
They gave me a hard time coming back across. I think they thought maybe I was kidnapping my girlfriend at the time, fiance, and yeah, they're like, "Where are you from?" I said, "Sumner, Washington." "What are you doing here?" I said, "Visiting, looking at the waterfall." I said, "Stationed down in New Jersey." "Who's that?" "My girlfriend." "Can she talk?" "Yeah." "Well, let her."
We'll ask her some questions.
Fine. Yeah, we were almost in prison. No, we weren't almost in prison. But so, do you go through Utica to get to Niagara Falls?
All depends on what part of New York you're at the time. So
Depends on the route you're taking.
if you're in Albany,
Right.
which is south of Utica, yes, you have to go through Utica to get to Niagara Falls.
If
But
I
you
was,
don't necessarily have to if you're on two wheels. You probably don't want to even be on I-90. You want to take a more scenic route through upstate New York.
I was coming from Harrisburg, but anyway, whatever. So, you grew up in Utica.
Yes, sir.
Started riding motorcycle at a pretty young age.
Yes, sir.
Joined the Air Force right out of high school.
Right out of high school.
Okay. Get sent to North Dakota. Get bored to death. Find Jesus.
Amen.
You were a security
Specialist. Right.
How much training to be a specialist? Did you start out like a security novice and work up to?
No, I just E1 or E0
Okay.
into E4.
So enlisted.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. All right. Let's hear it for the enlisted men.
Amen.
So, let's see. So, how long did you serve in the Air Force?
4 years, and from North Dakota, I was transferred to Germany, a little Air Force base called Hahn Air Force Base, Germany, which is no longer Air Force. It's a civilian private airport that's adjunct to Frankfurt Frankfurt Airport.
Okay. So, how long were you there?
I was there 2 years, and I became involved in ministry there, leaving North Dakota after accepting Christ in North Dakota.
So, I'm guessing you, not to interrupt, I'm guessing you would have been about 18 when you joined the Air Force.
19?
19.
I just turned 19.
You just turned 19, so early 20s.
Correct.
Okay.
And after accepting Christ in North Dakota, I immediately got involved in an airman's discipleship group, and they had a big old house in downtown Grand Forks, and we occupied all of the rooms, and we had Bible studies at night every night, and then we had a coffee house ministry in downtown Grand Forks every Saturday night. And then I got orders to Germany, and I thought I'd like to be able to carry that on. And so now it's 1975, get stationed in Germany. I go to the chaplain's office, cold call, and there I meet for the very first time an Assembly of God chaplain.
Really?
I never knew what an Assembly of God was.
So, what church did you grow up in?
Well, that was kind of an interesting story too. My mom didn't care what name was on the church in front. She only cared about how well the pastor preached.
Okay.
And so Free Methodist, Baptist, Presbyterian, she didn't care. It was.
So you had a pretty rich background.
I did.
Okay.
I did. And so I met this Assembly of God chaplain who happened to be on call for anyone walk-ins, and I was a walk-in, cold call, and I shared with him, hey, I'm a relatively new Christian, about 6 months, but I've been involved in this coffee house ministry in North Dakota, and I'd like to open up one here in the basement of the rec center on base. And he looks at me and he says, okay, you have my permission. And it actually absolutely blew me away. And so from that day forward, I opened up or planted a church, if you want to call it that, coffee house ministry. We were there every Saturday night in the basement of the rec center on base. We had airmen come in and get home-baked cookies from the wives on base, and coffee and lemonade, and we led lots of airmen to the Lord, and started our own traveling worship team.
Serious?
Absolutely.
So okay, you're in the Air Force, you're a security specialist, you're in your early 20s, you got this relationship with Jesus. Hey, I just want to have this Bible study. Did you have any inkling at that point that God might be leading you into vocational ministry, or, I mean, was it your plan all along that, hey, I'm going to be a cop?
God had opened up doors for me for ministry since almost day one of me accepting Christ. I go home after 3 days of work out in the cornfields of North Dakota and go home to my apartment where I meet my roommate who came in from leave. And he says, Tim, I scored a dime baggie of marijuana. Do you want to smoke some with me? And I said, Rich, I don't do that anymore. Why don't you do that anymore? So I accepted Jesus while I was at work. How'd you do that? And I gave him the same tract that I had. He goes into the bathroom, reads it, accepts Christ, and flushes the marijuana down the toilet. So it seemed like at day one, God opened up doors to use me. But to answer your question, I always wanted to become a police officer. It was like ever since I met Mr. Wire across the street, he was such a huge influence in my life that's what I wanted to do. And I did everything, to move towards that way.
Okay. So let's go down that avenue just a little bit. We'll certainly come back to ministry, but you spent 4 years in the Air Force. Mm-hmm. Did you get out while you were in Germany? Was that your final post?
That was my final post.
Okay.
I was accepted to Bethany Bible College in Santa Cruz, California.
My mom went there.
Mm-hmm. And I was, again, a 22-year-old freshman, and I had to live in the dorm my first year with a 17-year-old roommate, and that didn't go well. And
not just a roommate, total civilian roommate.
Total civilian roommate. The best roommate I ever had was actually from Kenya, Africa, Paul Casoso, and he was a great roommate. But I realized that I don't think that particular campus was a good fit for me. The professors were awesome, and what they were teaching was amazing. I couldn't absorb enough. But it just wasn't a good fit socially for me to be there. So Sharon graduated from Seattle Pacific University in Seattle. And
that's your wife now.
Oh,
let's segue back real quick.
Oh, yeah, we skipped that.
How long have you been married?
We've been married 48 years.
48 years.
Yes.
How'd you meet?
We met in Germany. She was a nurse, and we met in chapel.
Did you crash a motorcycle to meet her?
No. No, that's interesting. No, we met in chapel, and she came downstairs into the rec center at the coffee house, and she got plugged in and helping us run our finances and that sort of giving us some wisdom because she was 4 years older than the rest of us, and she was raised in an AG church at Spokane First Assembly, so she had a lot of the basis that we didn't have, and so she was able to really offer that to us. And as we started growing closer and closer together, the chaplain got more worried because he recognized the fact that we had come from two totally different backgrounds. And he actually counseled us without us asking and said, you two probably shouldn't get married because you two have nothing in common other than Jesus.
Well, and the Air Force.
And obviously we didn't take his advice.
Right.
But he married us.
And good thing his convictions weren't that strong, or they changed. So, Okay, so, and you said she was an officer.
Yes.
I don't know if you said it here. I know you told me. So,
She was a captain and I was a sergeant.
but she was not your captain.
She was not my captain, and nurses were really the only dating availability on the base anyway. So
Does she still outrank you, by the way?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, she only lets me be in charge when it's good convenient for her. So.
Perfect. That sounds very healthy. So, okay, Bethel, not a good fit for the location. How do you get yourself up to Washington?
Well, I married into a large family.
Now you were married. Did you get married in Germany?
No. We going to Seattle, going to Bethany. Sharon, as she got out after I did,
Okay.
and so she kind of hopped her way across the United States, visiting friends that she had met in the military along the way.
Okay.
And my visit was her last before she went back to Spokane to be with her family.
Okay.
And so while she visited me at Bethany, I dropped her off at the San Jose airport to send her back home, and God said, don't let her go. So I got on one knee in the San Jose airport and asked her to marry me. And her first words were, "Get up!"
Yes, ma'am? Or?
Absolutely, still do.
Oh, man. Okay,
So then we got married in Cooley City, Washington, at the Cooley City Assembly of God Church in 1977.
Wow. All right, good history. Good history. So, tell me about becoming a cop. I mean, security specialist, go to
Bethany.
Bethany.
That's okay.
Bethany. And my mom went there for like, I don't know, a semester, maybe a year. And then you don't just walk into the Seattle Police Department and say, "Here's my resume."
No. When I transferred to Seattle Pacific, and while I was a sophomore at Seattle Pacific, they were testing for Seattle. So I took all the tests, and I had forgotten about it. Now I'm in my senior year. 2 years had gone by, and out of the blue, I get a phone call from the Seattle Police saying, "Hey, we're going down our list, and we're looking for available qualified candidates. Are you still interested in becoming a Seattle police officer?" And I said, "Yes, I am." So in my senior year at Seattle Pacific, they hired me, and I went to the academy. And after my academy and after my probationary period, I went to back to Seattle Pacific and finished my degree.
Okay. So, got your degree, got all that. I mean, that seems like a pretty busy time in your life.
I loved it.
And married.
Yes, newly married.
Newly married. Yeah. So, has all of your police experience been with Seattle Police Department?
Yes.
Okay.
All of it.
All of it. And you told me I thought you were a motorcycle cop.
Well, it's interesting about my life on a motorcycle. Obviously, in Germany, that period had stopped, especially being a part of a touring youth group. And so I had stopped motorcycling. When I went to Bethany, I bought a Honda CB350 just to commute back and forth. And when Sharon came to visit me, that was my first exposure that she would have any interest at all. And she couldn't wait to get on that bike and go for a ride. So I realized, that was another reason why she was the right one. And then later, after we buy our first Harley in 1994, then she tells me, "Oh, by the way, my mom dated my dad on a Harley."
No kidding.
So I thought, why'd you wait that long?
Do you mind if I grab this picture?
Go ahead.
Because I thought maybe you were. I was under the impression you were a motorcycle cop, and I thought maybe this was like the start of it. They start you out on like your training wheels or something. Right. You got to prove yourself on a. Maybe we'll get that a little bit closer. See that? Oh, got a little reflection. Look at that young guy on a Seattle Police Department bicycle.
That's right.
How long were you a bicycle cop?
I was on bike for 2 years. Prior to that, I was in K9 for 3 years. I was a field training officer for several years. And then I was the community police team for the rest of my career, kind of a localized precinct level intelligence unit.
Okay.
So I enjoyed that. But during the whole time, I picked up another commute. I picked up a Yamaha 650. Now, all of the guys on the precinct rode Harleys. So I would roll in with my 650 Yamaha, and I would get razzed, and I'd get a hard time calling all sorts of names, which I won't repeat now. And eventually, in 1994, I purchased my first Harley Davidson, which I absolutely fell in love with the first time I twisted the throttle on it. It was just an amazing machine. I started riding regularly on my Harley, and I got involved with Harley groups and Harley rides and Harley events, and that kind of took me away from church a little bit. And I recognized that. And it was at a men's conference in Yakima in 1995 that I rededicated my life to the Lord.
Oh, wow.
And then in 1996 and 1997, Sharon and I went to Sturgis, South Dakota as tourists. In experiencing that, we said we were never going to come back unless it was for ministry. And in 2004, we started doing campground ministry in Sturgis during the rally. We did that for 20 years.
Wow.
But the department recognized the fact that I spent a long time, a lot of hours on my Harley. And I got a phone call from the commander of the motorcycle unit asking me if I would be interested to come and be a part of their team. If they had asked me prior to my rededication to Christ, I probably would have said yes. But Christ put me on such a wonderful path of ministry that one of the things you have to understand about a motorcycle unit in a major metropolitan area, you have no life of your own. You're literally on your motorcycle probably 7 days a week, 10 to 12 hours a day. And it's not only because of traffic control, but it's all the events, especially in a major city like Seattle. You got the Mariners, you got the Seahawks, you got the Huskies, you got parades, you've got protests, and you're at all of these events earning a tremendous amount of overtime. So you have to recognize what it is, count the cost before you go, and I wasn't willing to do that. So they asked me to come, and I said no.
Wow. So speaking in the police line, do you like cop shows on TV?
I do not. However,
are there any that are realistic at all?
Our favorite Christmas movie is Die Hard, so that's probably the most realistic, even with the language. But I like NCIS, so that's probably the only cop show that I enjoy watching.
We watch Chicago PD.
People recommend Blue Bloods, but I've never seen it. I've never watched it.
I don't think I've seen an entire episode. I started watching Chicago PD several years ago, and the main character, he's kind of like this rogue cop, captain or sergeant or what. Anyway, he would take guys down into the cage and get confessions, and it just kind of made me laugh. I probably shouldn't, but whatever. It's
entertainment.
It's entertainment. So that's not at all
no,
realistic.
It's not.
They don't do that in the Seattle Police Department.
No, not even with a wing. No.
Oh,
We've had officers abuse their privileges, and they've been fired.
Yeah.
So my chief was Chief Patrick Fitzsimons, and he was an old New York City beat cop that worked his rank up with the rank, and that is so prevalent in the East Coast that's one of your perks, is that you eat for free at any restaurant you choose. That's just a way of life for the PDs over on the East Coast. But on the West Coast, total opposite.
Oh.
We were ordered never to take a free cup of coffee. So if they did, we'd just leave a tip that would cover the coffee.
Were you still working at the police department during all the BLM stuff and the riots and things like that, or were you out of there by then?
The largest riot that I was a part of was WTO in 1999. I left the department in 2011.
Okay. So
Fortunately, I missed all of that. But when Floyd happened and they took over the East Precinct, that was my office.
Is that right?
And I was, at least to say, a little bit irritated as I'm yelling at the TV. In my career, I had trained as an FTO numerous officers. Well, one of the officers I trained was an officer named Keith, and Keith eventually became the commander for the SWAT team. So I have Keith's number. So while I'm watching this unfold live on TV, I'm texting Keith, you need to put your men up on the top of the roof with your less than lethal rifles, and you need to do this, and you do that. I'm ordering him what to do, and unfortunately, he said that he'd been ordered, and his team was ordered to stand down. So that was one of the most frustrating experiences I had, even not as a current officer, but watching my precinct be overtaken and invaded.
That's too bad. So let's move on to happier things.
Okay.
So you move out of that. I know you planted a church for a while at one of the Harley dealers.
Oh yeah, that was in 2015. The Harley Davidson in Renton, Washington, built a brand new building, and in it they built a 2,000 square foot meeting room. And I felt that the Lord just planted in my heart, wouldn't that be a neat place to have church? And so I went to the general sales manager and I said, what would you think about that? And he said, I love the idea. That's fantastic. Let's do it. So we moved forward. We had to make some changes upstairs because there was a lot of light, and we needed to, just make a few changes up there. We made a few changes, put in a little platform, a little stage, and we got some musicians. We created a great team of people. We're ready to launch. And the Sunday that we were ready to launch, they had put in a brand new general manager.
Oh no!
And he said, "This is not a part of our vision for our sales team. So we're going to ask you not to plant that church."
Oh man!
So I was telling our first-time guests as they were rolling into the dealership that we no longer had a church.
Welcome to our first and last service.
Exactly right. Exactly right. But that led me to, I'd been in ministry off and on with the assembly since 1975 after meeting the Assembly of God chaplain. Mm-hmm. But I'd never been credentialed. And I've been a part of the network's Ranger team, Royal Ranger team. I've been a part of the network men's conference team and other issues, but never being credentialed. Oh. And they kind of made a little joke about that. And but eventually, planting the church, the easiest way for me to do that would be as a credentialed minister, licensed minister with the assembly. So that's when I was licensed.
Yeah. Well, you've had some pretty exciting careers and pretty exciting.
It's been an awesome journey.
Just an interesting journey.
Absolutely.
A good trail, a good road ride.
A great road ride.
So then you pastored for 2 or 3 years up in Eatonville.
So that was an interesting call. One of my great friends and writing buddies is Ray Jennings out of Port Orchard, and it was a Saturday afternoon, and I see on my caller ID it's Ray, and I said, "Oh, he probably wants to go for a ride." So I pick up the phone, and he tells me a sad story about the pastor at Eatonville dying in April of that year at Good Friday of a heart attack, and that they were looking for a pastor to fill in and help that church become healthy again. And so Sharon and I went down to the church, and I just finished reading the book Circle Maker by Mark Patterson, and we went down and circled the church, and we just prayed and prayed and prayed as we circled the church, and just felt that's exactly what God wanted us to do. So the next 3 years I was pastoring a church when I've never ever pastored in my life. I didn't have a calling to be a pastor.
I think that's the best way to do it. I have absolutely no idea what you're doing. You just make it up. You just wing it.
I'm winging it, and fortunately, up to that point, I've had some great mentors, and so I've learned from those mentors the do's and don'ts of functioning a healthy church. And so I was able to do that, and as we're starting to grow and prosper, Sound Life Church in Spanaway approached me with Pastor Caleb and said, "We love what's going on there in Eatonville. We'd love to make you guys a satellite campus church." And within several months after that, now they're a Sound Life campus church in Eatonville and having 2 services.
That's fantastic.
So they're doing very well.
And now you're on to the next phase, retirement.
I've enjoyed
reassignment.
The idea of a chaplain was approached to me by the Seattle Police chaplain, John Owes, back in the mid to late 90s. He asked me if I would be his associate. Again, another open door that I had no clue as to what I was doing, and he needed help, and so I became his associate chaplain for the Seattle Police Department. And from there, getting into Harleys and joining a Harley owners group, they wanted a chaplain. So in 2004, I became a chaplain for the Seattle Harley owners group, and I did that for 20 years. And then the network asked me if I would consider being the chaplains coordinator for the network. So now, leaving Western Washington in July, late July of 2023, we moved here, and again, God opened up the door and introduced me to people to become one of the volunteer chaplains for the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office.
Oh, that's so cool.
So I'm enjoying that.
Well, Tim, thanks for your time, and I'm not one to give you advice, but I would just say, if I could say anything, just keep winging it, man.
Amen.
Keep winging it. Even though you're on a Harley, not a gold wing. Wing it.
It's worked so far.
All right. Thanks for your time, buddy.
Thank you.
You bet.